or authorisation to all vulture funds until the conclusion of An Garda Siochána's investigation on the fact that these vulture funds relied under secured assets to obtain those trading licences. I would ask every insurance company and underwriter who provides insurance to Irish vulture funds to suspend and or cancel vulture funds insurance policies to mitigate the tsunami of claims heading your way. Particularly, I would ask every bondholder across the world who has acquired bonds, securities or transferables from Irish vulture funds to seek immediate legal advice regarding the legality and the legitimacy of your bonds now. To every shareholder in pension funds across the world, particularly the Department of Justice in America, where pension funds have been invested in toxic loans in Ireland, to demand an immediate investigation into the criminal actions of Irish vulture funds and your immediate and imminent financial loss of your pensions. To the Irish judiciary, I would ask every judge across Ireland to adjourn all cases where the evidence of Tailta Éireann, formerly the Property Registration Authority of Ireland, is relied on until the conclusion of An Garda Siochána's investigation. To every Irish solicitor's firm and legal firm who has represented or represent vulture funds, I would ask you to take note of this criminal investigation that questions the legal standing of your clients before the courts of Ireland. You or your legal firm have a duty of care to inform the court of such criminal investigation where the evidence that you are relying on is now currently under investigation. To every sheriff's office and every receiver across Ireland, please be advised the documentation that you or your company rely on to execute may have been obtained by criminal means. To every security company, auctioneer, estate agent and locksmith who assist with the break and entry and sale of Irish family homes, properties, businesses and farms and goods, the legislation regarding your company directorship is absolutely clear. You and your company may be held personally liable for such proven criminal offence. Please consult with your legal advisors immediately. To every Irish family forced to pay extortionate interest rates to Irish vulture funds, the legitimacy of those vulture funds claiming to hold your secured asset is now under criminal investigation. Contact the Irish Central Bank and ask them to either establish an escrow account so you will not be endorsing future and further criminal behaviour. Finally, we have an opportunity here today to stop and undo what the present and past governments have done. We have an opportunity to kick vulture funds out of this country. We have an opportunity to start a global movement using social media platforms to replicate what we have done here today in Ireland. We are in a building that used to be formerly a fire station. It is strange to think that we are going to light a fire that will spread to 150 jurisdictions. It will spread to every vulture fund. They will have nowhere to hide. They're reliant on a contract that completely and utterly specifies they require power of attorney from the individual. I want to be clear on this. We have a contract, mortgage contract, as there is across the world. In the contract it says that the bank or the originator can sell the loan. We have no dispute with that. They say that they can securitize the loan. We have no dispute with that. You gave your limited power of attorney to the Irish media that are present here today and listening. Let me be clear regarding that, because it's very significant and everything turns on it. There is 4 types of powers of attorneys in Ireland and across the world. General power of attorney, limited power of attorney, enduring power of attorney, and lasting power of attorney. In your financial agreement with your original bank, you gave a limited power of attorney to register your interest in the Property Registration Authority, placing a charge, and that was it. It was over. After that, anybody that purchased your loan requires your attested power of attorney. I'm not making it up. It's law. In 150 jurisdictions, every vulture fund in this country, and not only every vulture fund, but every bank who, like the Bank of Ireland and AIB, who sold internally your mortgage to AIB to PLC to AIB Mortgage Bank, or Bank of Ireland to Bank of Ireland Mortgage Bank, on that catalyst, they required your power of attorney. We are not asking for any preferential treatment. We are not asking for anything other than the laws of the state to be enforced. It is ironic to think that for the last 7 and 8 years, we have had a government department complicitly working with vulture funds, solely because they don't do it with anyone else. When you go in to register a family home or a property in Ireland, you fill out Form 17 and Form 56. You identify how much was paid for it, how much exposure is to revenue, who registered it, and who the lawful owner of the charge is. In the case of vulture funds, Tailteann Éireann Property Registration Authority of Ireland willfully and deliberately withheld that information. If I go in to get a driving licence, or a passport, or insurance policy, I cannot have it backdated. I cannot fill out information that's fraudulent. I cannot offer to leave omissions and deletions, because that's a criminal act. It states it on every government form. Again, I have irrefutable evidence here in front of me, which shows that not only did Tailteann Éireann were they aware of it, because I notified them on the 19th of May 2019, prior to the transfer of loans in the Joshua tranche from AIB to Everyday, DAC, that they were about to break the laws of Ireland, and they ignored me. They took the application on the 14th of June 2019, and every month thereafter I printed out my folios of my estate, my assets, every month. And every month for 24 months, Everyday did not appear. And the last date that they did not appear was on the 26th of December 2021. In January, on the same date, 2022, Everyday appeared. But Tailteann Éireann did not register that date. They backdated the registration by 2.5 years, which is a criminal act, a deliberate act of falsification and fraud. Why did they do it? I don't know. What I do know is that because they done it, vulture funds, servicing agents, or legal firms went into court using falsified, backdated information to obtain family homes, to evict their families, to evict their mothers, to evict Irish children. Today I'm asking not for special treatment. I'm asking the Director of Public Prosecutions to do his job. to show as much enthusiasm as he did when he prosecuted our people for not having TV licenses, to show as much venom when he prosecuted young mothers who found money in their bank accounts and were given a lifetime criminal record. There is nowhere to hide, because now that we have a pulse number, I can tell you the second part of my plan, our plan. I've been on my own for so long that I use the word me all the time, but Liam constantly corrects me, and he's dead right. Because we have a pulse number, for the first time now we can go to every policing agency in the world. We are not limited to An Garda Siochána. We can go to every policing agency and make a criminal complaint regarding the falsification and registration of securities by vulture funds. There is going to be 4 more criminal complaints made. And just so we're clear, An Garda Siochána is familiar with the second one. And that is that I showed the financial records of Everyday, DAC, for 2017, 18, 19, 20, 21. In the year that they allegedly purchased those loans from AIB, their liquidity did not depreciate at all. But yet they bought 200 million euros worth of loans. Their assets did not increase at all for the year ending 2019, 6 months after they purchased. The year 2020, 21, 22, Everyday DAC either falsified their business accounts regarding the alleged purchase of 200 million euros worth of assets. They falsified their returns to the CRO. They falsified their reports to the Irish media. And they have falsified their application for charitable relief. Thank you very much. I'm going to pass this over now to Liam Deegan. For those of you who don't know Liam, he's an esteemed journalist who has taken on numerous people, particularly ministers. He has no reservation whatsoever about exposing the truth. And it's my honour to give it over to Liam. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom, and obviously thanks to everybody for turning up today. Particularly, we have a couple of guys here from the media sitting over here, and they're good friends of ours as well, so that will certainly help. We're getting the word out. What I don't want to do is to go through what Tom has already done. What I want to do is to read you an article that I wrote back in May 23. This is a true story. This was relayed to me by a member of the family. And when we get to the end of it, you're going to form 2 conclusions. You're either going to form a conclusion of sadness, or you're going to perhaps think, well, you know, this is a rising anger in me for what's happened, because what happened to these people is happening on a daily basis, and it's going to happen even more if we let the likes of the vulture funds away with what they're getting away with. So that's pretty much the reason myself and Tom kind of got together, that we could actually formulate something. But the something was based on 2 words, and the 2 words were we call it one word for the moment, misrepresentation. And it was Ed Honohan, the Master of the High Court, and I'm going to say the current Master of the High Court, because he still is the Master of the High Court. Ed put those words in our mouths, and he put them there for a reason. He knew that we could use those words to damage the vulture funds and essentially damage the financial system to some extent. Now, obviously, we're going to be very limited in what we can do in terms of getting right to government on this, but we don't have to do that. The only thing we have to do is do, as Ed has said, is make a criminal complaint to the Gardaí. And they're claiming fraudulent misrepresentation. They're the 2 words that you use. they're the two words that will start closing down all these organisations that have been chasing a lot of you here. So, with that, I'm just going to read you the story, and you make of it what you want, I suppose. 2 weeks before a group of masked men turn up at their home, Jim and Alison received a very official-looking letter with the Irish harp emblazoned on the top of a brown envelope, confirming that they will be evicted from their home. Immediately, they looked at each other with some trepidation, guessing what the content was going to be before they even opened it. Hands shaking, Jim opened the envelope and slowly took the letter out. Tears began to form in his already red eyes tired and sore from crying and suffering from the lack of sleep. Alison looked on. Her body began to shake, intensely focused on the letter, but fearing its contents because she pretty much knew that it meant the family were now facing homelessness for the first time in their lives. Jim threw the letter on the table and told Alison to start packing. Alison screamed as if she'd heard about the death of a close loved one. She cupped her hands over her face, tears running through her eyes, sobbing at not just the loss of her home, but the loss of her security, which has been her home for over 17 years. She looked at Jim, her face as white as a sheet, shaking with a mix of anger, disbelief, and every other emotion that engulfs one when presented with such horrendous news. Alison, in a state of shock, asked Jim to go back to the court people who sent the letter and plead with them for more time. Jim simply said it was too late and nothing was going to stop what they were planning to do now. Jim and Alison had been served with an ejectment order from the court. It meant they were going to be evicted, forcefully or otherwise. Alison rushed upstairs to the bedroom sobbing, distraught at the idea that they would soon be made homeless with nowhere to go. They had been reading about 14,000 plus families who had already nowhere to go or anywhere to call home. She looked everywhere for rental property in the locality but found nothing affordable. She asked everyone she knew to keep a lookout for a property for herself, Jim and the kids. Absolutely nothing could be found. Panic like boil began to fill up her throat, and she vomited where she stood, as she realised the full gravity of the situation. She called her closest family members to let them know what had happened and asked if they could help. This is the first time that either Jim or Alison had said anything to anybody about the predicament because they were so embarrassed. They were afraid to turn up in court for fear that the neighbours would find out about the upcoming eviction. Fear of neighbours and embarrassment with their families kept them from attempting to save their home, or rather than trying to save it if a judge was in any way sympathetic. Noticeably, strange cars had been seen stopping outside our house a few times during the week. Every time Jim or Alison saw the cars, their heart leapt. They knew that these would be security men who were going to assist with the eviction, doing a drive-by surveillance of their home. Later on, a good friend of Jim's called him on his phone and told him he'd seen the local police inspector and a Garda sergeant sitting down with the same security men in a local hotel. These men were discussing a strategy for removing the family from the home, especially if they resisted. So 1 week on, with little or no time to sleep, not eating, telling their kids they're going on an adventure, telling the older ones they were selling the house and would find a new place to live soon. 12:30 p.m. Alison took the younger kids to the playground. The older ones were hanging out with their friends, very much oblivious as to what was coming at them. 2:15 p.m. Jim, unable to work that week because of the threat of eviction, put his tools from his man shed into boxes. Overcome with emotion and racked with guilt, Jim took a long blue rope out of a box on the floor. Jim had used the rope to tow his neighbour's car recently and had thrown it into a box, not knowing what it might be used for again. 2:45 p.m. Jim threw the rope over the rafters of his shed and tied it off so that it sat 2 feet from the ground. Jim then stood on a dusty old chair, put the rope around his neck and tightened the knot. His final thoughts allowed him to take the ultimate journey as he knew that the life insurance policy was up to date and that Alison and the kids would be looked after. Jim took one last gulp of air and kicked the chair away. 3:15 p.m. Alison and the kids returned from the playground. The kids ran around the house looking for Daddy. Alison followed suit but couldn't find him. She took a look in the bedroom one more time and saw an envelope on the bedside locker with her name on it. Immediately upon opening it, she let out a blood-curdling scream and collapsed on the floor. The kids ran in and in panic tried to wake Mammy. Their little 9-year-old boy then found his daddy hanging in the shed. The funeral took place 5 days later, and in the graveyard, 2 Gardaí in plain clothes stood off in the distance, watching, maybe wondering if their part in the eviction had played a part in Jim's suicide. This is the reality of modern day Ireland. It's the one that outsiders never get to see. The stress debt, in many, many cases, equates to death, as in D-E-A-T-H. And the thing would be is to ask Alison what that means to her and her children today. Now that's a true story. And that's it directly from a family member as to what happened. Obviously, I have this kind of surmise about Jim taking his last gulp of air, but that's normally what happens in a hanging. So, in essence, I'm going to say something a bit different here with our friend Jim. You know, maybe perhaps Jim will consider making a movie in the same vein as I, Daniel Blake, but with a happier ending that shows the directors of vulture funds, debt servicing agents, lawyers and judges being taken out in handcuffs, escorted by prison officers, to happy music that makes you want to dance. I want to thank, there's so many people that got us here today. They've assisted myself and Tom to get where we are today. But I have to hold this to one man, and again, he couldn't be here today, but he's opened that door, as he said earlier, to what we call a momentous day, and to the many momentous days ahead of us. And we're unified, and we speak with one voice here. So I think everybody should put their hands together for the Master of the High Court, Edmund Thomas. I'd also like to thank our good friend Brian Riley for his access to people like Jim here, and the many other good people who have helped with the campaign. There's many of us who stuck at the crusade, as we call it, through thick and thin, and one of them, of course, is Tom Darcy. Tom approached me a few months ago to help him get an article about his book, Irish Tears, into the States. And I did that, and Jesus, how I regret it now. But in all seriousness, Tom and I spent weeks perfecting the Garda complaint. And eventually, after many nights and late nights and countless phone calls, we felt we got it right, and we did. And the proof is in the pudding with a Garda Pulse number in Tom's pocket. So Tom made history last Saturday with this. And just to say, I've done the same. I've also lodged a Garda complaint exactly on the same grounds as Tom has done. So what we need now is for every single person who's affected by the situation with Táilteann Éireann, what we need to do is make that complaint. If you have that issue, you need to make that complaint. Don't waste time, don't do anything less than download the template that we've produced that people can use. Now we get that information for you shortly. But there can be no lone wolves with this. The template worked, the complaint worked, so use it. Don't abuse it. So let's create this tsunami that we've been talking about for a long time, because this is the only opportunity, and probably the last opportunity we're going to get to do this. So we have to do it right. So again, thanks for coming. Let's stay unified. If you're in trouble, definitely stay unified. And that's how we're going to beat them. So, thank you.
Before I hand you over to the man that needs no introduction, when I wrote this book, my second book, I called it Irish Tears. For the simple reason is that I have dealt with over, according to my own records, 18,500 people, 18,500 stories, just like Liam's. I have gone to so many suicide funerals, gone to nursing homes where women pretended to have Alzheimer's so they'd have somewhere to go rather than to be made homeless. I've gone to skips and found our children, our Irish children, living in a skip. I've watched the Irish government invite vulture funds into this country. I've watched as the Irish government change legislation during COVID as emergency life-saving legislation. And they've done that to save vulture funds. They have done everything in their power to facilitate the eviction of Irish citizens, Irish families. I expose in that book the 90 TDs, members of Irish government, who voted in favour of evicting their own constituents. I've exposed across the world ads in the Wall Street Journal, ads in USA Today, supported by the Irish Bishops' Council. That book has been held up in the Dáil. It's never been achieved by any individual in the world. And we constantly get betrayed. I noticed a bill being proposed by Sinn Féin regarding vulture funds purchasing housing estates. And one after the other, our government voted to shoot that bill down. It tells you who we have representing, allegedly, the Irish people. They care nothing about the Irish nation. They care nothing about the Irish Constitution. They care nothing about our culture. But most of all, they care nothing about Irish families, the fundamental cornerstone of our Constitution. To An Garda Siochána, you have an oath of office to uphold the rules and laws of the state. To the Director of Public Prosecution, you have no option other than to prosecute this because it's out of your hands now. If you don't do it, Europe will do it, and they will expose the corruption of your office and every government department that has aided in the facility of the fabrication, falsification of charges on tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of family homes, businesses. I grew up, as most of you did, looking at Jim Sheridan's films and all, from My Left Foot all the way through. He has dealt with people that I could only dream about meeting. Daniel Day-Lewis would be one of my favourite actors. He depicted an Ireland that most of us considered was the Ireland that we grew up in. And I am sure today that he could be sitting on a beach in the Bahamas. He could be enjoying life anywhere else in the world. He has the fame and notoriety, the credibility, and the respect of the world. But yet he's sitting to my right-hand side. He has given his time, his expertise. He wants to expose what it's truly like to be an Irish citizen in Ireland. It gives me great honour and privilege to introduce you to Jim Sheridan.
Well, I'm just here because I think Tom's like the canary in the coal mine, you know? The little bird that's its metabolism detects carbon monoxide and warns you of danger. Because I lived through the bright and beautiful 60s that turned into a 30-year conflict And I sense now that there's a kind of, not the same situation, as the north of Ireland, but you can feel a kind of growing public discontent. And it was only when I heard Tom call, I don't know, I called him or he called me, when I saw that the police were involved, I thought, okay, this is a time for me to step forward, because everybody thinks like maybe I'm doing the Bailey story and I'm against the police and something like that. And nothing could be further from the truth. I actually, the name that sticks in my head as much as Bobby Sands or anybody in the last is Garda Fallon and Jerry McCabe and unarmed guards who are killed. And, we still have an unarmed guards and we have a relationship with them. And I would like to strengthen that as much as I can. So when they get involved, I'm 100% behind it. I met I didn't know any policemen before I started the Bailey story. But during it I met James Donovan, the head of forensics, and who was blown up for his services to Ireland twice. I met Assistant Commissioner O'Driscoll, who started the cold case review. And all of them are deeply honourable people, along with these unarmed guards who died for us. So I feel for the first time that a window has been opened that we want to look into what's going on. And either they look upon Tom as a radical, crazy, but if they do that and if they start shutting down discontent and talk, I think you're going to see, I'm not saying now with this, but you're going to see more of these bloody riots that happen. And that's the last thing I want Ireland to be consumed by. I'm too old to see it again. I'm on your side with the police inquiry. I want to see what the truth of where we're standing with all of this is. The thing I do remember most was when the Troika came to Ireland and they said that we have to reform the legal system, and the only thing we didn't reform was the legal system. So that's where I stand. I stand with this man in trying to get to the truth through the proper channels, without any violence, just by stating what he believes. So, Tom, happy to be here.
Thank you very much. Finally, for those of you who are recording this, for those if we're still on TikTok, I would ask you to dub this, change it into your own language, post it globally, because we have just created a global movement to expose the eradication of vulture funds. I would ask every person here today to understand that this is not a civil matter. It's purely, as Jim has identified, a matter for the guardians and protectors of the Irish people, An Garda Siochána. I knew I was meeting Jim today, and I'm sure he gets hundreds of books. And I wrote him an inscription that I was hoping would resonate with all. To Jim, one moment can become historical. Fingers crossed, today will be that day. Thank you all for attending.